Hello folks and welcome back. In this presentation I'm going to be going over chapter 5 from my book, which is going to cover my Bali Black Cube Moon and Anunnaki experience, the 27 Club, the Black Cube and Saturn, the Kabbalah, the Book of Revelation, Wormwood, Nibiru and the Beast, Israel, the Zodiac, astrology, Ophiuchus and Allah, to show how it all connects into this Black Cube matrix. Now in May 2018 I spent 10 days in Bali with a few mates on holiday. I managed to get my hands on some mushrooms following the theme of the scientific investigations of me now wanting to probe into the nature of reality and pierce the veil, work with my higher self and unlock my higher senses. That one evening in the villa, I ingested in the form of a mushroom shake, because it's very easy to get mushrooms out there because they're grown in abundance given it's the tropics. So I was very cautious to know how strong this mushroom shake was, but I took probably about 5 to 6 sips and that was enough. And it took about 45 minutes to dial in. The first noticeable thing that I experienced was time warping, where I thought an hour had passed, but I looked at the clock and only about 2 minutes had actually passed. I then went to position myself sat by the edge of the pool with my shins and feet in the pool. I then led back. And it was a pretty clear night. There was a few clouds around, but I saw directly above me the moon, which was 3/4 full. I don't know whether it was waxing or waning, can't remember. But after a few seconds of kind of staring and gazing at the moon, whilst this was like fully kicking in with the mushrooms, I started to notice this rainbow bridge come all the way down from the moon. I was following it, tracing it with my eyes, and see it hit my chest area. Initially, I thought it was coming in at my eyes, but I can see that it was actually landing and anchoring itself right into my heart chakra, my Azure point right here in the sternum. So I was tracing this back a few times and just thinking, wow, this is really quite interesting. There's obviously something going on that I'm connected to. That me having this entheogen experience has again heightened my sight in order to see other dimensional energies that are normally hidden in our calibrated 5-sense state. And this must have lasted, I know time is warping for me, but it seemed to last around quite a while, whilst a few other visions came to me whilst looking at the moon. The first one was whilst this was connected still, this Bifrost bridge, as you can see an image down there representing this kind of like rainbow bridge that was connected into me. I saw a structure basically surround the moon that was like a cube. That was exactly how this image is depicted of the Borg in Star Trek on the top left of the slide there, with this like super alien structure that was highly advanced, that immediately for me thought it was like a giant quantum computer, that the moon was otherwise encased within, as if it was like a porthole on one side of this 3-dimensional cube that's obviously always moving, so it's constantly facing the Earth as it moves around the Earth. It's like an observation tower, think the Truman Show. And so it's very interesting me seeing this, like that being revealed. That was like, wow, okay, there's a huge black cube that encases the moon, that obviously again confirms the things that David Icke presents in his Saturn moon matrix, and the things I was already starting to put together with understanding astrology and astrotheology, with Saturn being the greater malefic and the moon certainly being like a satellite to Saturn, with them both connected into a Baden, a Polion, which is the big bad black hole in the center of our Milky Way galaxy, connected to all the fallen black hole intruder races. That once I saw this, it kind of lasted again for about 5 or 6 seconds and then kind of disappeared. And then what came in afterwards were these two great big entities from waist high above the moon that were probably about 3 times the length of the moon in terms of their height above the moon, from waist high at 45 degrees to one another, but looking down at me as if I was in some kind of petri dish inside the dome. Okay, that they were kind of like then stepped up based on what was activated, maybe with the rainbow bridge, the Bifrost bridge connecting to my chest, and me actually seeing what the moon is otherwise a part of in a higher dimensional aspect with this structure. These two beings that were dressed in what looked to me at the time ancient samurai armor and attire, with masks that I couldn't really see their faces, but massive helmets with huge great big horns on their heads. And again, this image lasted for about 5 or 6 seconds and then disappeared, and then there was nothing more to report after that. Okay, then I think not too long after that, the Bifrost bridge, rainbow bridge, also disconnected, and kind of everything went back to normal, and I just kind of enjoyed the lovely feelings of the mushrooms in the experience until it kind of fizzled out 6 to 7 hours later. So that was really interesting. So upon returning back to the UK from Bali, I did some research and I actually came across this image, as you can see down here, of Anu, Enlil, Enki, and Ninhursag. Sag. And it was the Enlil and Enki particularly that stood out for me. That was like a true depiction of these two entities that I actually saw on the moon looking down at me after this activation took place. And now later on, as we go into later chapters, I found out that Bali was otherwise connected to the Alhambra cathedral networks and the 25 sacred sites, right? Which this is cathedral site 4 that Bali is connected into. It's the center site, which otherwise I believe and have surmised and concluded too, which we'll go into later, Brisbane is connected into also with the 777, just given all the outpitcherings that happened to me ever since 2023, which moved me all the way out here from the UK, and where otherwise is also connected into Denver with the Arizona gates there, of the D-span 777, and the UK too. And so looking back, obviously coming into this knowledge, it was no wonder why I got moved out to these places and assisting with the grids again, that this experience certainly confirmed for me my part and role in all this and assisting with the grids and the activations, not only for myself, but also with these so-called cathedral sites, Stargate sites, and grids for the Earth, right, with this kind of invisible war drama. But what outpitched for me for probably 3 to 4 months afterwards in the UK were a few dreams of these two entities penetrating my dreams and also taking forms above birds that were hovering in the distance, akin to my vision with what happened in Bali with the moon, that they were then projected from waist high above these birds, hovering, talking to one another, looking at me, talking, looking at me, talking, looking at me, and then they kind of like collapse the vision, the birds fly over me. And that happened quite a few times. And I remember in real life, there was a lot of birds, especially woodland pigeons, that were really synchronistically coming right across my face if I was walking, if I was on the bike, if I was in the car, almost hitting these birds. That kind of like, startled me upon walking or jogging or riding my bike, like I said, that I knew it kind of triggered me to look into and come across this concept of a vahana as taught in, I think, Buddhism and Hindu texts, which are mounts that certain entities can use in order to borrow eyes and ears and senses from particular animals to keep eyes on individuals and what's going on down here in this reality, that I thought was maybe connected to these two individuals that could possibly be connected into the Anu Seraphim of the Enlil and Enki lines of these individuals, these so-called princes, right? Which I know Ashiana teaches with the genealogy are kind of like race, that they're a collective of family lines and bloodlines. And so within that structure, yes, you will have maybe multiple princes, kings, queens, emperors, and hierarchies, because these fallen angels just absolutely love their hierarchy. That's what they're all about. Very arrogant, narcissistic, hierarchical, right? In regards to their control of resources, given that they're cut away and they're operating out of scarcity economics, which kind of gives you a needs must in order to protect and be austere of any resources you can gain your hands on when going around and robbing, stealing, pillaging, and vampiring off other living systems. That certainly these two entities seem to be, quite high up and connected into these race lines, particularly, and we're interested in what was happening with me, given what I was seeing and what was activated during that time in Bali. That outpictured and followed me. And as I researched more, came into more information, which others confirmed this kind of black cube matrix, which is quite interesting, that we're going to go into in obviously later slides, and within this slide, within this presentation and later slides. But it's just interesting that the Anu Seraphim, the Anunnaki, these particular Enlil and Enki race lines, as we'll find out in the next chapter, chapter 6, are part of the Anu Seraphim that have genetic ties with the Jehovian pure strain Anunnaki, Anu Elohim, as well as the fallen Seraphim. They're kind of like a splice between those two Christos founders races. And that's why you have different lines within them, because under the fallen Seraphim races, you have avian, reptile, reptoid, and also insectoid type life forms. Okay, so yeah, very interesting event. Otherwise, you can see here the black cube has 2,160 degrees and the moon is 2,160 miles across, which also ties in with, so the diameter of that is 2,160 miles across, radius is 1080 miles, which also ties in with the so-called precession of the equinoxes, which happens every roughly 2,160 years. The sun precesses through the sign of the Zodiac, which rises in the east on the vernal equinox, which is what marks the given ages. We had the age of Aries was under the Old Testament with Moses, right, and sacrifice. The New Testament was the sun in the age of Pisces, with Jesus being the fisher of men, Pisces being the two fish. Jupiter domiciles in Pisces as well as Venus. That's why Venus is linked to Friday in Islam and Muslim especially, as we'll go in and decode later on, where Christians have fish on a Friday. Thank God it's Friday. Jupiter is venerated on a Thursday, which is why they all have Thanksgiving on a Thursday. People go to church on a Sunday to venerate the sun, which is linked to Christianity in an astrotheological interpretation level, right, which is really quite interesting. And so yeah, the moon, as you can see here, certainly connects into the black cube as well as Saturn, as we will find out, and this whole black cube matrix. So those familiar, this is out of my book, those familiar with the 27 Club of famous actors, actresses and singers who sadly passed away at 27 may have its roots in this return of Saturn, who is meant to be the prince of this world, the angel of death, lord of karma and time, personified as an old man who eats his children, and also the grim reaper, with the scythe symbolic of this curve seen in the rings that surround this enigmatic planet that may be at the heart of this trick-or-treat phenomena that happens around 28 years old for individuals, otherwise ritualized at Halloween, and otherwise greatly described to be part of the system of the Alpha and Omega black hole wormhole complex that connects into the phantom matrix via the dark fallen sun of Abaddon/Apollyon of our black hole at the center of our Milky Way. I think the rings personified a kind of spellbinding technology that kept that planet locked into a particular frequency that may have once been a second sun within our solar system, with it being a gas giant, with evidence suggesting many other solar systems are in fact binary star systems. The hexagon storm on the North Pole, as documented by the Cassini probe flying past Saturn, bears the mark of this planet's seal, one which is well personified in the cube, in which a hexagon is the two-dimensional template for. By simply drawing a Y within the shape, you get the cube. Our material realm that scientists have observed is populated by carbon, which is the sixth element and has 6 protons, 6 neutrons and 6 electrons within the carbon element. Although the asteroid belt used to be our 5th planet called Meldek, according to the MCO AMCC teachings, before it was destroyed, technically Saturn was our 7th planet, but counting it today, it could still be the 6th planet from the Sun. But 7 is still relevant, as it is counted as such within the Stargate Cathara grid within the galactic solar Templar model, as we've gone over. Saturn is cold and dry in astrology and is classified as the greater malefic. It governs money, banking, structure, austerity and law, and is associated with discipline and hearing. Hence earrings to commemorate this sphere, and hearings within the court system. Hexagons are seen in the shape of coffins, which are traditionally buried 6 feet deep. We have the famous cross, which also represents a flat-packed cube upon which Jesus Christ was crucified. Metatron, an archangel in Judaism, is associated with the cube with Metatron's cube. In the MCO AMCC teachings, Metatron was a collective known as Giovanni before it fell, trying to help the conflicts and damage done within this time matrix, thus becoming a fallen collective that formed part of the black cube matrix. Satan is synonymous with Saturn, and as we will see, is one of the major causes for evil and illness being made manifest on our planet under astrology. The fallen Anu Elohim are connected to Saturn, being the 7th planet, which connects into the 7th universal gate of Arcturus, which is in Bootes constellation, which remember is that connected to that part of the sky north of Ophiuchus, Corona Borealis and Lyra, with the cradle of Lyra, the 10th, 11th and 12th dimensional stargates that connect into the inner god worlds, which they have a phantom Arcturus, equivalent of being the 7th universal stargate on their side of the matrix, which forms the base 11/10 tree of the Sephiroth in the Kabbalah. The symbol of the black cube is everywhere on this planet that Judaism, Christianity and Islam all connects into, as I will prove. Now it's interesting, with my natal chart, I started to activate when I was 28 years old. So upon Saturn's return, I certainly was gifted with a treat, right? And this is why this 27 Club, unfortunately, so many actors who may have sold their soul at some pre-incarnational contract level before coming down here in order to have certain bennies, that this ruler is certainly the prince of this world, without a doubt, given everything that we see down here. If we use deductive reasoning and backwards engineer why things are the way they are, it's because certainly this influence is in charge on planet, and pretty much governing everything, including the money, as we've gone over, the economics, everything. And it's the Satan is the father of deceit. This is certainly Satan is connected into Saturn, and these forces certainly operate in clandestine subterfuge and deceit, as we've proven with even the academic economic textbooks and scholarships are all based on false theories in order to keep the real truth of what is driving whole economies hidden, which has been a controlled science. That's been the model used for many other sciences, none more so than the energy and health sciences in particular, and certainly history too. This connects into. But it's interesting how I had my awakening upon this return of Saturn. Okay, and this is why it goes into that concept of kind of trick or treat, with the kind of good and bad aspects of this sign. I guess the good aspects of this, the virtuous aspects of this, if there are any, is kind of discipline, right? Or joyful discipline in regards to being able to focus on your dreams, and also hearing, which is quieting the mind in order to kind of break free from the spellbinding rings of being trapped within the kind of 7 chakras, right? That this kind of is certainly linked to the crown chakra, in order to try and stymie and contain your consciousness down here. And it's interesting, later we'll see with Kenneth Scott and how he interprets the chakras, the 7 chakras on Earth. Certainly the 7th chakra, which is connected into Saturn in a lot of models, are also, he claims, is connected to Antarctica, which is obviously covered in ice. And obviously as you wake up and you reach that 33rd degree, what's 33 degrees Fahrenheit? It's actually 0.5 degrees Celsius. So actually that point in which you start coming off ice and start de-shrouding the frozen mind and the frozen soul consciousness, that's actually locked in as a living zombie, walking dead down here, spiritually speaking, on a conscious level, until you start doing the inner work, right, and shedding these bands, breaking these spells that are binding us down here. And so what's also interesting, from Pierce Back's latest book called Angelic Invasion, in the back under the conclusion section of the hypostasis, he mentions a lot about the plasmas. And I'm just going to read from this. As you can see here, a diagram of the ring makers of Saturn, right, which is a famous book. I'll just read a few passages from this, which suggest, even at like a very earthly academic scientific level in astronomy, there's a lot of speculation as to what they saw with the Cassini space probe, with what's in the rings of Saturn to suggest alien technologies being used. So plasma physicists think that large quantities of helix plasma crystals, figure 179, coupling between charged dust and plasma, could potentially grow in plasma clouds that are found in the paired Kordylewski dust clouds, as well as the rings of Saturn, specifically the E ring and the plume of the Cronian moon Enceladus. Given the current up-to-date evidence, it is conceivable that intelligent plasma crystals are a significant feature of Saturn's planetary system. Putting the separate pieces together, it is extremely reasonable to surmise that the most likely place to begin humanity's search for extraterrestrial intelligence, at least within our own solar system, is inside of the ring complex of Saturn, a logical argument which we shall now turn our attention to. Okay, this is on page 234 of Angelic Invasion, and I'm going to just read a little bit more under the ring makers of Saturn, where he says, the late author Dr. Norman R. Berggren, a graduate from Cornell and postgraduate of Stanford, worked formerly as a chief scientist for satellite systems navigation and was employed by the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. In his technical book, Ringmakers of Saturn, he laid out the cogent argument that an extraterrestrial civilization coexists within our own solar system, demonstrated in the photographic sources obtained from Voyager 1 flight to Saturn in 1980. Perhaps more significantly, his detailed and academic proposition is later backed up in the satellite imagery taken from the Cassini probe in 2017. Both sets of photographs published by NASA are shown together and depict the following anomalous objects. Okay, so we have an image here of the position of the rings on the top there, and on the bottom there is the large cylindrical vehicle in the A-ring vicinity of Saturn, photographed by Voyager 1, flight to Saturn in 1980. I'll scan these in so you can see them. I'll blow them up. The theory that the tubular objects seen around the ring system of Saturn are extraterrestrial is a valid opinion, especially when taken in context with the known specialized properties of plasma physics. The premise that the rockets photographed within the ring formation of Saturn are a type of sentient construction is a logical deduction that can be extrapolated from the scientific research conducted into plasma. The exopolitical scholar Anthony Beckett, a postgraduate in chemistry, in his important book Proto-UFO, Cosmic Consciousness and Stranger Things, makes the following critical observations, to quote: "We have seen the capacity for an Earth-like plasma, a proto-UFO, to maintain a physical presence, predominantly as luminous plasma. We have also seen that these are also associated with metallic balls and other metallic objects. Remember, Foo Fighters were reported as luminous balls of varying colors and also sometimes as metallic appearances. Let's look at what constitutes something being metallic in observed form. Could a plasma account for all these appearances? If you have ever looked closely at a graphite pencil, you will likely have seen a shiny, slightly metallic sheen. Graphite is an allotrope of carbon. Where carbon normally forms 4 bonds with other atoms in organic chemistry, in graphite the carbon atoms bond with only 3 other carbon atoms and form a flat planar lattice, which is why they slide over each other so easily and leave a pencil mark on your paper when you draw with one. However, it is also helped by that 4th unbounded electron on carbon. This free electron teams up, forming a free electron cloud between the planar sheets of triple bonded carbon. It is this free electron cloud that gives the graphite its metallic appearance. Likewise, in metals, it is the free electron cloud, a sea of electrons at the surface, that gives metals their shiny appearance that we call metallic. Plasmas are also capable of having an exposed outer layer of free electrons that can give the appearance of metal, just like metals themselves and other non-metal material. Although you could argue that graphite is technically the metallic form of carbon, so the implication is that when these plasmas are visible to the human eye, they will appear as light forms if they are luminous, but beneath the glare, you may just have a metallic outer appearance structure. Perhaps as nocturnal lights, these would be visible as metallic forms under daylight environmental conditions. Of course, this in itself clearly does not explain away all metallic-looking UFOs as simply metallic-looking ionized clouds of gas. So you've got a few of the images here relating to these objects found within the rings. So the top image, according to Dr. Norman R. Bergrun in his scientific book Ringmakers of Saturn, the cylinders orbiting Saturn are enormous in size and range from an impressive 2,900 miles in length to a staggering 31,496 miles. The object in the Cassini image is positioned vertically and is in opposition to the gravitational pull of Saturn's ring system, conveyed horizontally around the planet's circumference. The cylinder is also illumined at the bottom, suggesting a jet, streamer, or propulsion system, an energetic dispersion identified originally in Norman R. Bergrun's academic study, Ringmakers of Saturn, published in 1986. And now the bottom image, so that image at the top was Cassini satellite in 2017, that commentary was about, which you can see there. And then the bottom image, where you can see these 2 metallic type tic-tac capsules. The 2 perfectly synchronized objects share the same angle and refract light differently from the surrounding rings. The Cassini photographs reproduce the same elements found in Voyager 1 flight to Saturn, which indicates that the initial observation of the phenomenon in 1980 is not a photographic artifact or an anomaly. Instead, the 2017 images from Cassini imply that the phenomenon is real and can be scientifically reproduced. So yeah, Saturn is very interesting because it goes into a lot of what I was working with consciously as well, which we'll get into later chapters with my Saturn's ring, which was the Lord of the Rings replica, and how I had my activation around 2017, which is when all this was kind of being found out. That was when Saturn was returning for me too, and later finding out that the rings of Saturn are kind of disappearing and will disappear, that NASA proved again around the time I found that my Saturn ring had cracked. Okay, so and how it connects into obviously, you know, the 7th galactic stargate, and then the universal stargate of the Anu Elohim, and these black cube races, black hole races, right, using this kind of technology, AI technology. Like I said, the structure encompassing the moon looked to me to be like a giant quantum computer, otherwise greatly depicted in the Borg in Star Trek. That's exactly the same as what I saw, with all these like little rectangles, and it was super highly advanced, but just to me, just immediately got this intuitive message that it's a quantum computer. And some kind of observation tower as well. If you recollect Jim Carrey in the Truman Show, I believe there's some truth in that, but it's also fulfilling other things like messing with the reverse plasma light here, deflecting astral light away from our pineal gland, which is why it's atrophied as well, which is commonly found in if you actually look at the United Kingdom emblem, they say the moon is symbolized by the unicorn. And if you look at the United Kingdom emblem, right, the coat of arms, it actually has the unicorn in chains, which is otherwise symbolic of the third eye. And what they've done there, that the moon as an implant, you can imagine a moon an implant on Earth's anatomy energetically, is actually deflecting light away from that organ of us to be able to see into density 2, which is the higher astral realms of dimension 4, 5, and 6. Okay, and that's why we have a pineal gland atrophy, just like your normal eyes. If you're born in a cave, you never see sunlight for all your life, your eyes, your physical eyes, are going to be severely atrophied, probably to the point where your body just shuts down, because you often lose what you don't use, right, in evolution. And so you're heighten your senses of hearing in order to counteract and try and survive within pitch darkness, you know. So just giving you an idea, that's exactly what's happening with our higher organs, right, our higher senses and perception to be able to do that this moon is certainly working as well to deflect, as well as to reverse the violet plasma energies, observation towers, and help run the mathematics and harvest loosh, amongst many other things. And obviously perpetuate this blank slating reincarnation cycle of souls trying to get up and out of here, but just get spat back down here unconsciously most of the time. If you're conscious of it, then you would have woken up within this lifetime and realized what happened before you came in here, before fetal integration, right? The color associated to Saturn in astrology is black, which is the color of death. Hence why we see black attire at funerals and in the courts where the magistrate, the chief necromancer, summons the dead, which is your name, is a dead corporate entity known as an ens legis, nom de guerre, government-created fiction in order to operate and contract in commerce with other dead entities, to rise for a hearing. Okay, a cross used for crucifixion is a flat pack cube, possibly signifying this element of the spirit body being nailed to the cross of matter under the auspices of this austere ruler and the forces behind it. Saturn's glyph is the cross atop the curve of spirit, displaying the subjugation of spirit by matter. The planet itself is the furthest from the sun with the naked eye and is associated with winter for the northern hemisphere, who domiciles in Aquarius and Capricorn respectively, opposing the sun in Leo. Saturn governs the bones and spleen in our anatomy. That's interesting. When I learned about how Saturn's connected into the bones from Manly P. Hall's book Secret Teaching of All Ages, I was at work on a lunch break when I read this, and it was around autumn as well, and I just got these bone chilling cold and chills, right, and shivers that almost my whole body started to seize up and freeze over, as if like this archontic presence came into the room and turned the degrees down by like 20 degrees from where it was, which was like probably 3 or 4 degrees already, very cold. And I was just freezing. And I got to the point where I couldn't even talk. And I remember one of my colleagues phoning me, and I kind of like was trying to talk and I couldn't. I had to then text him, and it took me ages. And I was having to like just shunt, like the Inuits do, blood down my arms and kind of pace up and down the warehouse that I was in order to get the blood back in my feet and arms, which lasted for like 10 minutes before then I started to regulate my body temperature again and come back into, you know, being able to actually speak and operate effectively. So that was a really interesting bone chilling experience, quite literally, when coming to the knowledge of Saturn being linked to the bones and the skeleton, right, structure of our anatomy as below in astrobiology. Saturn governs the bones and spleen in our anatomy. We have 33 vertebrae in our spine, which leads to the place of the skull, commonly referred to as Golgotha, which in Aramaic translates to skull or cranium, where Jesus Christ was crucified. Okay, 33 degrees Fahrenheit is 0.56 degrees Celsius, the degree in which you start coming off ice and no longer frozen, as I alluded to, a symbolic reference to awakening and enlightenment that marks the start of unbinding your mind soul from Saturn's kingdom, or from being hexed. Saturday is the day of this planet. In Judaism, its main religion. Although Christianity and Islam also have their connections to this sphere, religion comes from religare, okay, to more or bind a vessel. Sabaoth is linked to a host or boat and signifies an army of angels or emissaries. A ship is a vessel that is seen in ships of state and worship. The nave of a church is where people go to worship their God, which is linked to the navel, which is linked to navy. If you walk inside a church, it looks like the inside of a boat's hull, symbolic of being capsized, where lost souls are captured. Interestingly, Yasha claims that many churches, mosques, and temples are Metatronix zap stations, meaning people who go there are knowingly having their template altered to run the reversal currents of the black cube matrix here on Earth and be little mysteries for their lords and hosts in heaven. In Pierce Bach's work on scaphology, angels are synonymous with sailors, which is part of this classical tradition that's highly classified, that defines class within the hierarchy of kinship and lordship, where there is evidence of this non-human angel and human angel represented as the seraphim and cherubim dialectic that are antagonistic. An important point when analysing these spheres of influence on humanity's psyche and society that have moored themselves on our planet, as will be plain to see, if not already. So you can see there images of the North Pole Saturn with the hexagon, and if you just drew a Y and connected the kind of top two on the left and right and the bottom angle, it will be like a 2D representation of a 3D cube, and that's where you get your Star of David from, and that connects into Metatron's cube and the reverse mathematics of the black hole matrix and the Kabbalah, especially, as we'll come to find out. So in order to help us decode the cube symbolism in Judaism, Christianity, Saturn, and the Kabbalah, we are going to take a look at some occult diagrams and texts surrounding these geometries and philosophies to see what is really going on and where it is all leading to. Keep in mind the cosmogony of the MCO AMCC teachings and how God, source eternal, has no beginning nor end and does not play Warden, but intelligently creates eternalized systems as 15-dimensional 5-density holographic time matrices that are built on the base 12 Katara grid as we dissect other occult schools' cosmogony. Okay, so I'll go in quite depth with a lot of these diagrams that I've got from Manny P. Hall's Secret Teaching of All Ages, which are Rosicrucian tablets taken from the Rosicrucian fraternity and mystery schools that otherwise show the Jehovah Elohim, which is linked to the Kabbalah in this kind of Holy Trinity of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Note, no matriarch, there's no mother aspect to this. And the Son of God, right, with the Alpha and Omega, pouring itself into such vessels and planets as Jupiter and particularly Saturn. Okay, and this is quite a famous diagram as well that kind of shows the so-called Jacob's ladder from Earth. You've got to pass through the Moon, then Mercury, then Venus, then the Sun, then Mars, Jupiter, then Saturn, then connects you into being able to access the fixed stars, which is the firmament, and then the prima mobile, right, which is the crystalline sphere, and then finally up into the Empyrean, which is paradise, which is so-called heaven, under their model of the Kabbalah. Okay, and as we've seen, what Saturn represents, what it's connected into, the Moon and Apollyon, it certainly is going to give you some aspect of heaven, but within a phantom matrix, subtime, distortion, anomaly, black hole reality zone. Okay, in my opinion, and from my research, and from Asher and many other authors who, again, doesn't take a genius to kind of connect to the dots, or in this instance, connect the black cubes to work that one out. Okay, so if you want even more detailed analysis of these diagrams, recommend looking at my book. Just to save time, I'm not going to go over that because it's basically just, again, confirming a lot of these terms of Jehovah, Elohim, Alpha and Omega, the Son of God, the Holy Trinity that, you know, takes away the feminine aspect of creation. So it's quite easy to see that's very patriarchal, and it's very much slanted towards the black hole fall, races, ideologies, philosophies, and technologies. So from the eternal point of Ketha, also known as the ancient androgen, springs forth Chokma, the great father, and Bina, the great mother. They are often referred to as Abba and Ama, respectively, being the first male and female prototypes of sex. These correspond to the first two letters of the four-lettered name of God, Jehovah, Yod-He-Vah-He, the Tetragrammaton. The father is the dash or I, and the mother is the K or H, which gives us Yahweh, Yod-He-Vah-He. Interestingly, when you insert the letter Shin in the middle of the name Jehovah, the word Jehoshua or Jesus is formed. thus you can see there on the slide. The name Jehovah is commonly linked to the number 26 by counting the number of the central pillars of the Sephiroth. It is also claimed to be linked to the number 24, which are the 24 powers before the throne, with the name of the power of evil being the sign of Jehovah, but reversed or inverted, apparently, according to the Kabbalah. Controversial, Pierce Back describes Jehovah, Yahweh, as follows, open quote, fallen from grace, Yahweh is chastised by the ultimate all-knowing spirit, and his claim of superiority is dismissed within the hypostasis of the archons as nonsense. Undermined by the absolute, Yahweh is renamed Samael, the god of the blind, and is mocked as ignorant. His affliction used to make a jibe at the watchers, who in their lust for power are considered to be visually impaired. Myopic, Yahweh is defamed by his own conceit, and according to the Gnostic treaty is equivalent to the divinity Samael, Old Semitic Sa-ama-el, literally Prince Blind God, a ditto based upon the compound pun Samael, a deity of heaven, a god likened to a commander, Samer, a leader or king. Mutual, the cognomen Samael, the god of the blind, serves as belittlement and as covert acknowledgement of a sightless watcher, the Elohim, the High Ones. A seraphic angel, the demiurge, constitutes a genus of beings that are duplicated and are recreated from pure matter, an embodiment of the false spirit. Equivalent to an Elah-K, a high creature, the demiurge, the genetic engineer, resides in heaven and is chastised with the archons, variously the Elohim, for the elevation over God. To quote the hypostasis of the archons, section 294, it is I who am God, and there is none other apart from me. When he, Yaldabaoth, said this, he sinned against the entirety, the absolute, and a voice came forth from above the realm of absolute power, saying, you are mistaken somehow, which is God of the blind, end quote, end quote. Furthermore, in Voyages 2, The Secrets of Amenti, Iyasha also labels Jehovah a false god and collective of phantom matrix Anunnaki intruder races called the Jehovian Anunnaki Fallen Anu Elohim Jehovian D11 Dark Avatar Collective. Intriguing, the symbol of the Binah is the dove, which is the symbol for the Atlantean pylon implant network systems that they have on planet, which is called the Jehovian Nephite Dove and Olive Branch HDC Apin, a pervasive force. They are responsible in creating the Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, Jehovah, God stories, Kabbalah, Hebrew text distortions, inverted, reversed 10 Sephiroth tree of life, and removed 6 letters from the Hebrew alphabet. Okay, if you recall, in the previous chapter, we went over the Book of Revelations and what they wanted to achieve with the trumpet pulses and the Dove Apin system, which obviously connects into Phantom Octurus, which is inevitably what they wanted to rip our living side of the time matrix into alignment with, for those sections of the grids connected to the Dove Apin system, right, which looks like a dove from above Earth when looking down using photoradionic scanning equipment, okay, that we'll go into in later chapters to actually show these maps with everything they wanted to fulfill, which will go into, you know, the Wormwood, Nibiru, and the Beast, as we'll cover in this presentation. She goes on to state, open quote, the Anunnaki dominated New Age, pseudo-ascension spiritual movement, most of it inspired by the Templar Melchizedek false ascension teachings of Anunnakis Thoth, pre-Emerald Covenant Enoch, Archangel Michael and friends, Jehovah, Maitreya, Lord Melchizedek and spiritual hierarchy, the Urantria, etc., inherently promotes a fear-based paradigm of light, love, and pretend away the darkness, dogma. These groups prey on the spiritual longings of Christians and Hebrew peoples, borrowing the false crucifixion of Christ story from Anunnaki and draconian edited and embellished traditional texts. The fact that the false crucifixion story has been so predominant in the founding of so many cultures for the last 2,000 years gives one some idea of just how successful the Anunnaki have been in using the net, which is the Nibiruan electrostatic transduction field, and the NDC grid, which is the Nibiruan diodic crystal grid, and their manipulated Illuminati hybrid Leviathan races to ensnare our minds. Since the 9558 BC Atlantean flood was staged, such spiritual rape by religious control dogma deception has been propagated in every culture by various competing fallen angelic intruder ET forces via channeling to and manipulation of the amnesiac Illuminati races. Perversion of the once sacred Emerald Covenant spiritual science Maharata Templar teachings that form the 12 global freedom religions that were humanity's heritage from the Ancient of Days until Atlantis has been done as a strategically planned and progressively implemented element of the Atlantean conspiracy agenda, end quote. It seems the Kabbalah, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all teach of evil, as we have seen, so they don't really pretend away the darkness as Yasha claims in that statement, but they certainly rule through fear of damnation or punishment for not following the law or practices required by God in order to reach salvation. Most often the enemies they portray are other factions of fallen angelic races that they are competing with each one labeling the other the devil within their doctrines. Rather, they falsely claim and assert themselves to be our gods, where they have merely manipulated the original base 12 human angelic template on a mutated Earth within a mutated solar system and galaxy, rendering us as mutated humans who are easily manipulated, especially after being blank slated, that they claim to be the gods over. Moreover, in Voyages 2, it is said about the Kabbalah, open quote, the original Melchizedek priesthood, as it exists today, was founded on surface Earth in 1982 BC, prior to Akhenaten's reign, within the Nibiru cloister race in the area of Salem, which became Jerusalem. In ET Nephilim, an immortal Syrian human hybrid from the Second Seeding period, was brought to Earth from Nibiru in 1979 BC, carrying a patriarchal version of the Templar Creed, which allowed knowledge of ascension and genetic protection to reach the Nibiru and Aryan races. This individual became known as Melchizedek, King of Salem. The foundations for the modern-day Jewish religion were laid at this time with the establishment of the priesthood of Melchizedek among the Hebrew, Nibiru, and Aryan races, through which the mystical studies of the original Kabbalah were organized. This group emphasized the patriarchal slant of the Templar Creed within the Jewish faith and heavily influenced the evolution of the Christian faiths. The Templar Melchizedek Essenes were taught by the Elohim to believe that they were God's chosen people and that they held the key to ascension. End quote. The Ascension Glossary has this to say about the Kabbalah's artificial tree of life, open quote. It is based on the inverted teachings intentionally given by the Thothian groups to generate reversals in the knowledge given in the original founder records, and this is overseen and administered by the Yahweh Collective located on Saturn. The Kabbalah esoteric information was brought through in pieces from distorted patriarchal Melchizedek intelligence that had been captured and reverse engineered through their original knowledge of the universal tree of life, and the quantum mechanics that are included in the 12 holographic plates of the Emerald Founder records, end quote. So you can see here the Sephiroth overlaid with the Cathara grid and what that connects into, which obviously is a much greater cosmogony with even our anatomy and what it connects into and out of deep space as above and down into Earth's core down below, and that we got 12, whereas the Sephiroth only really has 10 or 11 max. And then you can see here the unified eternal consciousness geometries, which are the non-dual, the perpetual life source code, lotus of life, juxtaposed the fragmented finite consciousness of the dual, the metatronic flower of life, also known as the daisy of death, because within that you can also see the cube, the hexagon. Symbolism and mathematics come through. In addition, she explains on page 414 in Voyages 2, under the chapter titled Decoding, so we're in Book of Revelations now, Decoding Revelations, the One World Order Schedule, which is going to reveal more of the Jehovah Anunnaki that connects into Saturn. Open quote, since the Jehovah Anunnaki fallen angelics edited and partially rewrote the original Essene Emerald Covenant CDT plate, which stands for Cloistered Dora Torah plate, translations that were supposed to be the foundations for the Holy Bible, we have been progressively set up to assist the Jehovah Invasion team to fulfill their One World Order vision. The Jehovah One World Order agenda of the Dove Apin System Group as of the September 12, 2000 has become formally incorporated into the general One World Order invasion plan of the United Intruder Resistance. The reality of planetary physics we presently face can best be illustrated by decoding portions of the biblical revelation story that directly apply to our contemporary circumstances. We will receive greater benefit from the revelation story if we can begin to understand the truths and contrived agendas hidden within this Jehovian written intended dominion schedule. The most important aspects of the Book of Revelations have to do with the stories of the 7 seals, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, the 7 angels with their 7 trumpets, and the 24 elders before the golden altar and Jehovian throne, and the 4 beasts before the altar/throne. Interestingly, in recent modern translations of the biblical revelations, the mentioning of the 4 beasts before the throne of Jehovah has been lifted in status from its earlier beastly translation to become the four living creatures before the throne. Yet another subtle little sleight of word translation to further distance us from awareness of the true hidden translation of the text. We have discussed the ancient microchip-like technologies of the APIN systems left in Earth's planetary shields from the Atlantean period. The APIN grid networks were designed by their various creators in the shapes of animals or birds when viewed from space with photoradionic scanning equipment. In the story of Jehovian Revelation, Saint John the Divine reported witnessing the four beasts before the throne. The first was like a lion, the second like an ox, the third had a face like a man, and the fourth was as an eagle, a flying eagle. It is no coincidence that the four most powerful pin systems on Earth are those created by the Emerald Covenant founders races, the Great White Lion Elohai Apin, the Blue Oxen Maharaji Apin, the four faces of man Ayani Elpin, and the Golden Eagle Seraphi Apin. The Jehovian vision given to St. John was cleverly disguised, almost literal symbolic depiction of the Jehovian Anunnaki and Anu Elohim intention of securing the founders' Apin systems under dominion of the throne of Jehovah. This interpretation of the four beasts in Revelation is not guesswork or presumption, it is truth of Revelations decoded as contained within the founders' CDT plate records. The the Jehovian Revelation story is a step-by-step illustration of the Jehovian Anunnaki's intended invasion schedule. End quote. So you can see how tricky these guys are. And I know, like I mentioned before in previous presentations, that upon my awakening, I was certainly plugged into the Alpha and Omega, Jehovian Anunnaki, biblical God depictions kind of veneration, that I even thought that I was kind of the Alpha and Omega, and these were the codes that have been run through the grids based on the trumpet pulses. But the Guardians were counteracting that with the chevron burst to collapse this one world order doomsday prophecy apocalypse that they obviously wanted to try and achieve down here, okay, which has been prevented luckily, no thanks to all of the Guardians and us down here on Earth volunteering to help intervene, to save this time matrix from being sucked in and under into their phantom matrix. So these guys, the Anunnaki, the Anu Elohim, they've got the 11th strand activation, which makes them understand the art of seduction, and highly deceitful. The fallen seraphim races are capped, especially the Omicron Draconians, and these guys are kind of capped at a substrand 10th DNA level activation. That's why they're linked to the 10th dimension of Lyra Vega. The Anunnaki were in Avion, Stargate, Universal Stargate 11. Okay, and so these folks, although they've been at war with each other, both of them are very highly intelligent, very deceitful, but it's just the Anunnaki, they've got this, the 11th strand gives them that kind of advantage with this art of seduction, right? And certainly the way they've, through the Protestant Bible, Christianity, King James and all that, people plugged into that with the Alpha and Omega and the Book of Revelation. Like me, before I kind of woke up and realized that was part of another consciousness trap, venerating fallen gods, claiming to be our gods, whilst labeling other parts of the fallen angelic crew as devils, none more so than the Jehovian Anunnaki labeling the fallen seraphim races, which they've just despised ever since they were kind of like basically seeded here, which, you know, began the war and the rupture which created the black hole in the first place with the original point of sin. That I was plugged into. That obviously, yeah, once you find out and start reading between the lines and realizing what you're dealing with, you can completely remove yourself and align yourself with what is true, what is, you know, original, and what is eternal. And yeah, you just connect the dots with the black cubes juxtaposed, you know, the geometries of that and what they're connected into and the eternal life systems. It kind of just makes sense and is self-validating. So you can see here a diagram which is showing our universal and galactic solar system, Templar along with Weesadex and Phantom's interface, and Nibiru's and Wormwood's orbit taken from Dance for Life, Love, Freedom Manual 2002. For more detailed explanation, I'll leave a link down in the description below on my Odyssey channel that Iyasha explains with this, which is quite complicated, as you can see. But it's otherwise detailing what would have happened if they had their way in regards to pulsing Wormwood when it popped back into our density from the Phantom Matrix, using their gate systems of the 666 network that Jupiter's plugged into and our Sun to push this planetary body between our Earth and the Sun, which would have then created this interdimensional distortion wave that would have, you know, disrupted a lot of the orbits and bring everything in to collapse in on itself, create a black hole, and then align it and rip it into the phantom matrix, Arcturus, Jehovah and Anunnaki agenda of their holographic time matrix so they can get more quanta to sustain their reality system and their immortal lives. We can see how the interpretations of the Book of Revelations are contrived to help manifest the end times Armageddon prophecies, which goes right into technologies being used to help rip our solar system and the gates connecting all the way up and into Lyra, down and into their phantom matrix. This also involves Wormwood, Nibiru, and the Beast, as mentioned in the book. That is otherwise a prophecy of using these planetary masses and technologies through the Beast configuration of the 666 gate network, connecting into our Universal Gate 6, Phantom's Gate 6, and Zodiac's Gate 6. To zap frequencies through our galactic Gate 6, Jupiter, to help knock Wormwood out of an artificial orbit within the Nibiru that was designed to make a pass between our Sun and the Earth, creating huge disruption that would have ripped the whole interdimensional stack of our time matrix that hadn't fallen into Phantom, into the Zodiac black hole matrix, dragging with it the Phantom matrix, as these two were competing amongst one another for the Quanta/Templar. Now the Zodiacs and the Zodiacs are from another Vecca ecosystem called the Weaselay, all right, and so they fell in their full black hole full matrices, and obviously once they fell, they were able to plug into the Phantom matrix, then into our living system. So we were dealing with 3 fallen systems, and the races that are residing there once this Phantom matrix fell within our living system, because they were still connected, and then through wormhole networks they connect into one another, and then they're all competing in order to try and garner and capture the soul quanta whilst maintaining their kind of angular rotational particle spin and integrity within their alignments of their holographic imploding time matrix, the black hole system, where other black hole systems do exist, that even there's been agendas to try and take over the other fallen black hole systems within these fallen angelic crews, right? Which is just a complete mess, as you can imagine, with the politics and the friendly enemy deals and the many moving hats on people's heads and races and agreements. But yeah, each one of them are very steadfast and stubborn and dogmatic in wanting to, just maintain their reality system, be their own little gods within their own version of an imploding holographic time matrix, okay, cut away from God source and what it means to be eternal. So Nibiru used to be our 12th planet, and Chiron our 11th planet. Chiron was broken in half, and part of it was made the Pluto's moon, and the other part pops up in between Saturn and Uranus, and it pops back down into Phantom. These fallen angelics use technologies to move entire solar systems, not only planets, and they do this to create a set of weights and balances that provide the perfect electromagnetic conditions of push and pull to be able to do things like this. In 25,500 BC, they pushed Nibiru into the orbital pocket of Chiron as the 11th planet, then later pulled it into an artificial orbit in Phantom with another half of a planetary mass that was taken from the blown up planet Meldek, which was our 5th planet, now our asteroid belt, that was used to counterbalance Nibiru's orbit so it can be used as a patrol station. This remnant of Meldek used to counterbalance Nibiru's orbit is otherwise known as Wormwood in the Book of Revelations, and shared an orbit with Nibiru that made it pop into our system from their Phantom system every 3,657.8 years, where one of them would come into our system and the other pop back into Phantom orbit. The most recent cycle had Wormwood pop into our system around Trapezium Orion and moves toward us through the Stargate 2 domain, which is Epsilon and Eridanus, and progressively moves toward our system, where it then pops into our galactic plane and passes through where the asteroid belt is. This is what would have been used to create the cataclysms talked about in the Book of Revelations, and is otherwise what so many speculate as being Planet X within the New Age community. What many people don't realize is that there are 2 planetary masses involved here in this story of Nibiru and its orbit. It's interesting, as I progressed with my awakening, I was plugged into this whole Book of Revelation script, where I was led to a fellow online who had himself a spiritual awakening, that's that naughty beaver character, and started to dissect the prophecies surrounding this time with the Book of Revelations and Nostradamus prophecies. He was hell-bent on keeping an eye on the skies, with the planetary mass passing between our sun and the asteroid belt to be the sign of the divine intervention we had all been waiting for. A common theme amongst many infiltrating the New Age community, including the pole shift narrative as well, all helping to see the apocalyptic timeline under the guise of God in heaven coming to establish a new heaven and new earth. Yeah, once you're sucked into a black hole and reconfigured on the other side in a reverse base 8 twisted Metatronid template. See how the webs they weave, like these fallen angelic folks, it's just incredible. The deceit, it's unbelievable, really. That's why you're going to be so careful with the occult. So many people, especially in the New Age, are just getting plugged right into venerating and giving their power and energy away to these fallen scumbags. In regards to the importance of Israel and Jerusalem, Iyasha states, open quote, Jerusalem, Israel has long been a battleground for control of primary planetary vortex 2, a direct link to Stargate 2, which is the Grual, Holy Grail point of Sarasota, Florida, which is the control gate for Earth's planetary shields. And the USA has been, since the formalization of the Luciferian Covenant in 9560 BC Atlantis, the intended arena within which the fallen angelic final conflict drama, Battle of Armageddon, is planned to unfold, making way for the rise of the One World Order. The Emerald Covenant races have repeatedly returned to Earth incarnation in attempts to prevent this fallen angelic devised end-time scenario from occurring. End quote. Kenneth Scott of Gemstone University elucidates quite well the agenda of bringing the One World Order of Zion, as diagrammed in the New Jerusalem, with the cube under the control of the all-seeing eye of Anu, Jehovah, Yahweh, in the Kabbalah, that is at the base of the word Israel, being a composite of Isis, the moon cult, Amin-Ra, the sun cult, and El, the stellar/Saturn cult, forming Israel. Again, closely tied into this Saturn moon fallen angelic matrix agenda. The two-pillar system of Freemasonry and the Royal Arch, symbolic of this hierarchy of the fallen angelic collectives that embodies this arrogant patriarchal philosophy of survival of the fittest, might is right, dominion-based philosophies, which are inherent with fallen races and anti-Christic mindset, who have to adopt this stance to fight over resources as they exist in a finite, imploding black hole system that needs more and more quanta to sustain itself by consuming other living matrix systems. A situation that demands control, authority, hierarchy, and austerity to manage the depleting resources, which is all primarily based on fear, as I've mentioned before. So we have the Zodiac, astrobiology, and Ophiuchus. The four creatures, as mentioned in the Book of Revelation, also synchronize with the four fixed zodiacal signs of Leo, being the lion, Scorpio, also being represented as the eagle. Remember Aquila connected into that with the northern deacon, and how there's many animals depicting this kind of ascension through the sign of a Scorpio and Ophiuchus. And we have Taurus, Aquarius being the man, and Taurus being the ox/bull, which are now aligning on the equinoctial and solstitial axes. This also aligns with the Guardians' four aping systems, something the negative forces aim to take over in order to assist their agenda of taking Earth and the rest of our entire holographic time matrix into toroidal shift alignment with their black hole system. The Ascension Glossary online has some interesting information on the Zodiac under Zodiac Alteration, where it states, open quote, it has been confirmed by Guardian Host that the 7D Galactic Gate of Saturn has been used as the headquarters for Zodiac mind control transmissions, and that this planet's aura and logos is the densest and most problematic in the entire solar system. Saturn is an Orion group or a Contic outpost located primarily in the outer rings for many of the negative alien agenda activities to distort and pervert the lower dimensions and propagate the 4D astral delusions along with the 5D false ascension programs. Most of the false ascended masters of the New Age using the 5D false ascension program through Orion group are actually broadcasts transmitted through the Saturnian body in the 7th dimensional Phantom Arcturus area of the galactic portal. I remember there was another one, 3D to 5D consciousness, that's still being perpetrated to this day. Again, plugging you into a really finite false black hole fall ascension. Additionally, through field work, it was confirmed all forms of blood cult worship were designed through Orion Group by manipulating the constellation transmissions and using Saturnian worship interchangeably for propagating satanic ritual abuse on Earth. These distortions and their disadvantages remain heavily prevalent with those humans who may have heavy Saturnian square and opposition influences in their zodiac birth chart. So for spiritual clearing, purposes of curses, hexes, blood covenant, or blood cult history, see black magic, one may need to review Saturnian influences for removal of satanic influences in the birth chart that may have recorded astral body bondage made in agreements that serve the self-interest of the Orion group, end quote. It goes on to detail the zodiacal structural principles as being both energetic and geometric blueprints based upon lunar zodiacal imprints that were designed by the invading races to suppress human consciousness with the lunar matrix, open quote. When astrological alignments occur through major conjunctions between planetary and stellar bodies, massive energetic forces of alchemy occur between celestial bodies and the sun-star networks, which alter the frequency current and manifest into new creations. This new cosmic alignment changes the stellar architecture, which impacts how the sun transmits the energetic influences of the zodiac constellations throughout the chakra wave spectrums in the solar system, in which the planetary consciousness is gradually undergoing a lunar to solar transfiguration during the ascension. Previously, most of these stellar forces have been obstructed from being exposed to the lower atmosphere of the Earth by nets of alien machinery. The aurora are the plasma light fields of the Master Christos collective from the next universe, of which are building the zodiac stellar architecture to host the planetary ascension. The whole process of regeneration, alchemy, and the magnum opus that connects into Scorpio and Ophiuchus has its roots in the eternal process of raising the chrism and working with the universal mercury of the mysteries, also known as quicksilver, which for men is the semen and the potent life force that represents, and that which can be transmuted from base metals, root chakra, and into gold, which is pineal gland, the sexual creative energy. Thus, manly rites of the lamb, mentioned in the book of Revelation, open quote, the lambskin apron worn by the Freemasons over that part of the body, symbolized by Typhon or Judas, represents that purification of the generative processes, which is a prerequisite to true spirituality. In this allegory, the lamb signifies the purified candidate, its 7 horns represents the divisions of illuminated reason, and its 7 eyes, the chakras, all perfected sense perceptions, end quote. A very interesting interpretation that later led me to try and raise this chrism and kundalini, which did in fact unlock a profound experience for me in December of 2019. And as you can see there, representation of the diagram of our physiology and astrobiology, as above so below. And the Ophiuchus, that hidden 13th, is actually located in your fetal cells, tailbone, cranial sacral axis, solar sacrum, kundalini, amrata, Leyden gland, base of brain, golden chalice, lunar to solar transfiguration. Okay, so yeah, and it's obviously tied to Scorpio, which again is the bladder, urethra, genitals, descending colon, prostate gland, testes, sigmoid colon, nasal bone, pubic bone, red coloring matter in blood. All right, so it all connects with this ascension and initiation that tends to happen through this sign, these forces, as above, so below. So we're going to end with Allah on this one, with Islam. Unfortunately, you do not get out of this because it's all plugged into the same false godlets and technologies. Where I write in my book, my intuition of Allah being another name for possibly the same fallen collective is confirmed in Pierce Back's research, where he states that the cryptic analogies pertaining to Allah are associated in the Bible with Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of the Hosts, a commander of angels. Another correlation is found with the Hebrew letter Shin and the Arabic name of Allah, which shows what Pierre calls a visio paranamasia, a word pun, as you can see down there, comparison of the Arabic name of Allah and the Hebrew letter Shin. If you recall the connection to the Hebrew letter of Shin when joined with the name Jehovah, we get Jehoshua, or Jesus, being the Son of God, a very salient point that cannot be ignored and will later help us decode this most recent, influential and enigmatic entity that has captured the hearts and minds of many. Moreover, we have another cube at the Islamic holy site of Mecca, which is known as the Kaaba, that shares phonetic similarities to the first 2 syllables of the word Kabbalah, that also joins their god Allah to Kaaba, forming the Kabbalah. Pilgrims circle the Kaaba several times counterclockwise to fulfill the rites of the pilgrimage. This symbolizes the rings around Saturn, with the cube at its north pole, and the number 7, with Saturn being the 7th planet, which connects into the 7th universal stargate of Phantom Arcturus on the Anu Elohim side of the fallen matrix, a number they revere and consider God's favorite number. Black being the color of Saturn and the Kaaba, which also has an interesting tower with the clock, another symbolic reference to Old Man Kronos, atop of which lies the crescent in the shape of horns, another symbol connected to devils and demons. It seems Satan/Saturn certainly is the god of this world. Question is, how many people actually realize who/what they are worshipping and giving their power away to? So many are under the spell, unfortunately, and plugged right into these consciousness traps. Ignorance really is not bliss, and I feel for those souls who are plugged into these hive mind reverse mathematical programs of deception, but hopefully with knowledge comes power and also the ability to free yourself of these invisible chains. Okay, because at the end of the day, all religion on this planet is always plugged into trying to contain your consciousness and stop you from seeing the truth and connecting into the true God source and your higher identities through your higher selves. okay, and your direct connection back to God, source, first eternal. That certainly does not require any sacrifices, there is no beginning, no end, right? You don't have to believe in a son of God or whatever else, rites and rituals. You just got to have faith, know who you are, study the history, come back online and openly assist in creation, knowing that everything exists within God's source, and anything that's otherwise, trying to stymie your growth and get you to fulfill acts of violence and hatred towards other people is certainly only going to favor the fallen angelics and help feed these entities loose and everything else with what they have as their agenda, which inevitably was to take all of us down and then to their black hole system as food. All right, folks, so yeah, big one to unpack there. Should be very clear, self-evident, don't have to go over it again. But yeah, very interesting. You should connect the black cubes as always rather than the dots, and it just proves itself that this presence on Earth is connected into the Jehovah Anu Elohim. And then you have the fallen seraphim races as well that kind of jumping on this bandwagon, but ultimately they're kind of at each other. But what we have, unfortunately, in power at the moment are the worst of the black hole 4 races, which are the Finborns, okay, which are linked to the Fatali, who are otherwise using all of the technologies and ideologies and philosophies and stuff that they have set up here in external creation through these fighting fallen angelic races, and now using that. And there's one main force that are basically in control of all of them, in order to try and bring about whatever it is, delaying the inevitable really for them, but trying to take as many people down with them as they possibly can. Okay, so it's now's the time to wake up to all this, come back into the driving seat and your own power, and yeah, seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be open unto you, ask and you shall receive. So there's certainly still wisdom in a lot of these scriptures that you just got to discern, but the overarching stories within these scriptures are ones that are very much have been used to suppress our potential and tell us a load of porcupines, basically. All right, folks, so thanks for listening and watching. I'll see you over in the next one in chapter 6, where we'll be going over the genesis and history of our time matrix, the 4 Christos founders races, and the intruder races, Abaddon, Procyon, Apollyon, Andromeda, M31, and more on the black hole systems. Okay, so until then, guys, stay safe, stay sovereign, and I'll see you over in the next one. Ciao for now.